your name on it. Just put your name on it. That's all I say. Be a man or a woman. Put your name on it.
Well, I'd like to hear about it, potheads.
How the fuck you gonna know how to be great if you don't study greatness? Look at the game tape.
Donuts.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, you're not a bad-looking man, Mr. Gals.
But you are, Blanche. You are in that chair.
There's something wrong with us. Something very, very wrong with us.
Oh, hey, buddy. Oh, yeah.
You look.
Thanks, Poppies.
Carl married Jeannie and I. Did you know that, Joe?
I did know that. In fact, when we made the little video of your story with Jeannie, I found a picture of Carl marrying you guys on the beach.
Jeannie calls him Hot Tub Carl.
Hot Tub Carl.
Because at one time on that beach in Malibu, Jeannie rented this house that we call
the porn house.
The porn house. How's his mic? Is it good? The porn house, because they used to, I guess, shoot porn in it.
Is the porn house, did it survive the fire?
It did not survive the fire. Even with its little 40-foot long, 5-foot wide pool, did not survive the fire.
Yeah, it had a pool that just looked like a weird... Yeah. So there was a hot tub there, and Carl just plopped in the hot tub and just... It was kind of like every... You got to understand, Carl's like the mayor of Dog Beach, where I used to live. Carl's the guy. Ran for city council. He was my landlord. I had a 1-month Airbnb in August of 2018, 17-ish.
Yeah, 17-ish.
And parlayed that into a 3.5-year living in this with this great guy and his family home in like a guest house, like a Cato Kalin type little house underneath. And I wanted you on the podcast because we're going to talk about the fires as best you can. We'll go chronologically. But also I think there's this perception of, well, all these fucking multimillionaires, boo-hoo. And it's like, no, this is a guy and his mom. Mm-hmm. You were born in this house.
Yes.
So what year were you born?
1967.
67.
Yeah.
What's your first memory? Like when do you, like, my awareness is like in my driveway on like my big wheel looking up the street, like this is where I live.
And how old were you?
I think I was like 3.
Yeah. I was 3 as well. My first memory is my dad hanging off the deck with a hammer and nails, working on our railing on that side of on the east side of our house.
Yeah.
I'm like, I have this vision, and my mother's like, yeah, that would have been 1970. So yeah, I got something from 1970.
And you were on the patio?
Yeah, I was on the patio in front of Mom's bedroom.
Yeah. So the house was on the street level. You go down 4 steps, and it's Carl and his mom, Carol, and his daughter, Callie. At the time I moved in, I believe, just going into high school.
Yeah, she'd been 13 maybe?
Yeah.
14.
So there. But then you go down like maybe 25, 30 steps to the beach. And if you look to your right, there's like a little 1-bedroom guest house that was on Airbnb. And that's where I lived. So I was there for the month of August, and the visceral memories of me in New Jersey at the Jersey Shore. He let me use his fishing rods, and I was fishing for like big, deep sea rods with 30-pound test line, and I'm catching 1-pound perch from the shore. And I figured out I can use mussels attached to the rocks for bait. But at high tide, the rocks are underwater. So I didn't know, like, you just wait for low tide. So I would swim out underwater, and I'd pull these mussels out, and the tide, when it went back out and came in, I had to hold on to these rocks for like dear life underwater, or I'd get sucked out or sucked in. And then I come up, this is like August, maybe 30th. I was supposed to leave like the next day.
Yeah, he was close.
And I come up for air, and he's like this aquatic god on I'm like, struggling. And he's just on this paddleboard, like floating, like in Luke Skywalker's hovercraft. And he said, my mom and I, we don't want you to leave.
Yeah.
And I said, I can't afford it. He said, well, we'll work something out.
Yeah.
And we just fell in love. It's my brother now.
Made another 3.5 years.
Oh, boy. And
what was it about Jay that made you guys not want him to leave?
Because he loved the water and loved the beach and loved our community. So he was part of what we were doing, and he got into it and understood what it was. You know, it's like, you know, we've had tenants over the year who just don't get it. They can be there. Usually they last 6 months, maybe a year at most. But within like 2 weeks, I had JJ out in the water, underwater, getting mussels so he could fish and catch perch, but then we would fillet and eat. And he just was, you know, and then he met all the neighbors. You know, our community there's about 50 houses, and there's a lot of folks who have been there 50, 60 years. You know, my family's been there 70 years, and so it's like, it's our space, it's our place.
70 years you guys been there?
My dad started renting the house in the early to mid-50s. Met my mother in the 61, 62, and they bought the house in 66.
How much did they pay for the house in 66? Malibu beachfront property.
1966 was $36,000.
Jesus.
But you got to remember, 1966.
I'll give you that for the lot today.
So in 1966, we had water in the tank on the roof. We had sometimes electricity. It's sort of like Malibu now on the west side. Sometimes electricity, but a lot of times there wasn't. Water would, go off. The pipe would break regularly. So, when we had it, when we finally got it a few years later, it was not easy living. So, but it was about, being on the beach, being on the water, not being in it, being out of it, and being part of, they call it a rural thing, but it's just, for us it was being in the water. And I go out and you go fishing for your food and you go diving for lobster and you just live on the beach. And it's like an old, wonderful.
Was your family Californians for a long time, or?
No, my mother's from Wisconsin, and she came out, did the classic when she was 25, jumped in the car with her bestie and came to California. And my dad did the same thing about 1928. He was from Stanley, Idaho.
1920, no.
1928.
Really?
My dad would have been 1927, 1928. His father was a grocer and got a gig in Fresno. And on the way out to the gig in Fresno, they said the gig's gone. So he got a gig in Long Beach. And so that's where my dad went to. So my dad from 1927, 28 was in Long Beach for a few years. And then they moved to Santa Monica. And then after he was in the war, he moved to Malibu.
Which war was that?
It was World War II.
Oh, yeah. He was
he was a pilot in World War II.
That's badass. People don't really Malibu until, as you just put it recently, it's rough. It's the Wild West. And back, Jeannie gave me that book, The Queen of Malibu, about Rand.
May Ringe.
Ringe.
She used to own all of it. The Rancho Malibu.
All of it. And
Yes.
if someone was on your property, they got shot. It's where criminals went to hide out. It took a full day to go from downtown LA to Malibu. There was no transpo. The train was always going to go up the coast, was always the plan. And they could never get it right.
Correct.
Because she just fought them back with
She fought like hell.
Shotgun style.
She had her own judge, too.
Oh, yeah.
One of our former mayors, his father went fishing in Las Flores Creek about 1900 and the guys on horseback with the guns caught them. They were 12-year-old kids, caught them and took them to the judge. And their sentence was, get the fuck out. Don't ever come back.
Yeah. And even after I got sober and I went, Carl had the worst 3 years of me. And somehow we're still brothers. It was bad. But even when I got sober and went back to make amends, and then we got back on the horse, we went back fishing. Joe, getting a paddleboard out of the rack, going out to sea, coming back, getting off the paddleboard, just bringing a paddleboard up the stairs. It's you don't do it unscathed. It's always you crack a fingernail. I still got a scar on my shin from walking into Julie's deck chair. It's easy living, but if you live the way he lives, you got to be a man. You can't be a sissy and
A waterman.
you got to be a waterman.
You gotta do it. That's what we learned,
And I did my damnedest, but I got nowhere to go. When he would wipe out on his paddleboard, it was instant chaos laughter because he's the kind of guy that surfs on the paddleboard and he doesn't fall down. He just goes up over the lip of the next wave and paddles back Do you remember when you had to shit?
Yes.
We're paddling and he goes, I had some bad Pollo Loco last night. We got to go back. I'm like, all right, let's go back. And he goes, you know what? I'm not going to make it. And he jumps off the paddleboard into the water and he's got his elbows up on the paddleboard. And I just kept paddling. I look behind me and his butt is floating. He's like this, and he looked exactly like his own baby portrait. When they propped the baby up.
do that.
I wasn't going to make it.
His little bare bottom, and he had this smile on his face ah.
Carl, I've done the same thing.
What are you going to do?
In Montauk.
You got to do
Perched
it.
up on my surfboard. Called it a sea launch.
Yeah.
Yeah?
You got to do what you got to do. I mean, it was still in a few hundred yards, and I wasn't going to make it.
Yep.
You went to Malibu.
Thankfully not in a wetsuit.
You went to elementary school in Malibu?
I did. Went to elementary school and middle school, and there was no high school yet, so I went to Santa Monica High.
All right. So January 7th,
Yeah.
right?
Right after your insurrection.
Right after you
Yes.
got back from the Capitol.
Yes. Took
So-
care of that.
The wind was it was malevolent. It was a weird, my point being, I learned about the fire on my drive back to the west side, But before that, something was not like, it was just a weird. Do you remember January 7th, the morning of?
Yeah.
Something was brewing. It was weird. Like, what were you doing January 7th?
I was on my way into
Yeah.
to my former office.
Did you notice? Did you feel like a fight was gonna break out? Like it was something weird.
Yeah, because the wind, like that wind, it's not like when you're in a like back east, you know, the wind like rips through the trees and whatever. And like in California, it's palm trees, and if you're in between those, like it's an eerie wind, you know, because
shit flies everywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Everywhere.
Shit is flying across the freeway that like would normally be used to hold down something from the wind. You're like, there's a paperweight flying around.
A windshield wiper flew past me
Yeah.
leaving the store. An actual windshield wiper. And this is in West Hollywood. And I go back, I'm on Wilshire, and I believe Biden was in town also.
Yeah.
So there was cops
Yes.
everywhere. You couldn't go through like where the federal building is on Wilshire to West Hollywood. And it was just, everything was locked down. It was very spooky. You on the beach, you are more dialed into nature than anybody I know. He's fucking Aquaman, this guy. So do you have a premonition that the fires are?
No, it was one of those things, you know, it always, you know, I've had winds like that all my life. We get easterlies, we get them. Some years we get lots of them, some years we don't get a whole lot of them, but they happen. It's just now when we get an easterly, there's a fire, like every time. And so that made me nervous because January 7th was also my mother's 90th birthday.
Wow.
And so we'd had a plan for about a month to go out for a dim sum brunch, something she loved. One of our old neighbors flew into town, and we met them out in Monterey Park. And right when we got to Monterey Park at about 10:30, 11, we got word there was a fire in the Palisades. And I thought, I'm like, that's a problem. I know where that is. That's a problem. If it was on the west side of town, it would have not been the same problem. Palisades or Topanga, I'm like, that's a problem. So we inhaled a couple of dumplings.
Got the dumplings.
As we do, I'm like, okay, Mom, we're done. Again, go, let's go. Back through the valley, back to PCH. Ran into a checkpoint, managed to get us through the checkpoint. Our dogs were home. So either way, we're getting through the checkpoint. We got to get the dogs. And
Where was the checkpoint?
Checkpoint was at Duke's. So it was only less than a half mile from my house.
Yeah. So what time is this around?
1 o'clock.
So at 1 o'clock, they
Maybe
already got a
1:30.
checkpoint set up, and they just want to know that you live there. They would just want to keep the traffic.
They didn't want anybody to go through. But I said, I'm about 300 yards that way. I got my dogs and my to-go kit. It's time to go. Get it and I'll leave.
So you guys were already being told to evacuate at that point?
We were told not to go in, yeah. But we managed to get in because we were right there and the guy let us go, which was terrific and appropriate. I mean, there was no reason not to.
Yeah.
All right. So you get home.
It's about 1:30, I'm guessing.
So take us through chronologically, like 1:32. Like when do you start seeing? When's the first time you go, oh, something's on fire close to us?
Well,
Closer.
yeah, so we kind of, we knew the fire was blowing up really quickly and headed towards the beach. And then we started hearing that it had gotten to the beach. And that made me
Real
nervous.
quick,
Maybe 4
easterly
o'clock.
meaning the wind's coming from the east for the listeners. Usually the reason
Yeah.
it takes longer to fly from New York to California, California to Hawaii, is you're getting blasted with wind this way. Everything stops. Then it blows from town out to the beach towards the water.
330 days a year we
Yeah.
blow westerlies. And 30 days a year we blow easterlies. That's pretty standard, usually in the fall, maybe into the winter. So I'm like, all right, that's a problem. It's at the beach and this is blowing offshore, but there were still some swirling winds. And although everybody talked about 80 to 100 mile an hour winds, we didn't have that. We maybe had 30, 40 mile an hour gusts. So, but it's a problem and I was concerned about it. And so we started figuring out, okay, let's get some stuff in the car, good variety of things. I had, my sister was there as well and she had her car. So we loaded her car with whatever we could take in it and the dogs. And then, so then we started hearing it got to Topanga and was just shooting down the beach at Topanga. And I realized that was a problem. And because it was on the beach and coming down, but houses on the beach aren't supposed to burn. Where it's supposed to be the stuff in the hills. But I'm concerned. And then we hear it's coming through Reel Inn, Cholada, and it's coming through. And so I managed to get my mother and my sister to leave about 7 o'clock. And so I was happy at that point. I was there. I had a car to get out as need be. I had the ocean for an escape as need be. So I had a few options at this point. There were a few neighbors were there. Cops had asked us to leave a couple times, but we were okay. And then we could see the fire coming over the hill at Big Rock and coming right along the beach. And then one of my neighbors lives down in Tuna Beach. I see him driving by, and he's got a hysterical look on his face. He U-turns and looks at me, and he's about 2 miles away. He's like, yep, fought for about an hour. All my houses around me caught on fire. Mine caught on fire. Every house is gone from Topanga to the edge of Big Rock. Like every house, he's like every house on the beach.
Wow.
At that point, I knew it was coming for sure. And we were trying to figure out, so there were still an occasional fireman, occasional cop around. I'm like, all right, we got a chance. Let's get some hoses going. Let's get some buckets, fill some trash cans on the roof. Try to get ready. Try to see what's next. You know, how long can we do this? What have we got? What's going to light on fire? And we just kind of waited for a stretch and just kept flooding everything. I had a couple neighbors who were there. My neighbor's about 10, 12 houses down. One of them has been in the brigade, so he had some knowledge about what to do. So we just kind of prepared to see what would happen. No firemen. That was a scary thing. I did the same thing in 1993, stood on my roof with my dad, and as the fire was coming along the hillside, it was terrifying, like 100-foot flames. And I looked at my dad, and then I looked at the firemen lining up in front of the house and the engines, and I thought, well, it's time for us to go. This isn't our show. And so I thought the same thing would happen this time. The firemen didn't do the same thing.
How far is the fire station from your house?
About a mile. Carbon Beach.
Why didn't they come?
They were there, but they were just parked in the Duke's parking lot. Now, I have no ill will to those guys. This was obviously, somebody said, you know, this marketing thing I keep hearing, that it's about, you know, safety over structures. We've been hearing that for about 8 or 10 years now. Like, it's just plugged into us. Safety over structures, sort of like, you know, the armoring of the coast and managed retreat, all these like buzzwords. And somebody's got that for, I don't know what the purpose is, what the reasoning is.
Like, save the people, don't worry about the house.
Correct. That's and that lands, right? That does viscerally lands. Yeah, that's the right way to go. Well, why you know, we should be able to do both in the process. You guys did it. There were 8 engines in front of my house in
So
1993.
Duke's is maybe 2, like you said, 300 yards.
Duke's is
Not
about
even.
a quarter mile.
So a quarter mile, there's fire trucks from your house.
Probably 40 to 50 fire trucks.
Oh, wow. That's the entire lot.
40 to full the lot, and then they're lined up in front of La Costa Beach. Probably 40 or
Well,
50.
what were they doing? Lifting weights?
And the crazy thing is, so they didn't come up, and then the whole next beach, even though which was past where they were, that all burned too. So they obviously retreated from there as well.
Wow. How? I don't. Talk me.
No,
Talk for me.
And
That's policy. It's not choice. Those guys fight fires.
Right.
Those guys in those 40 engines, they fight fires. If they were told to fight the fires, they would have fought the fires.
So you think the parenthetical is they were told, do not fight the fire?
Do not go in. Do not fight the fires here.
What the fuck is that shit?
I don't know. I have no idea. I have no conspiracy anything. I don't like none of that. All I know is those guys were clearly told to stand down. And 1 or 2 of them kept coming up and saying, you got to go. And I'm like, so the fire finally showed up at my house at about, with coming down the hill and coming over the top. And it was intense, but it wasn't as scary as 93. To me, for whatever reason, the flames weren't as nuts. They were 10, 15, 20-foot flames instead of 80, 100-foot flames that were the time before. So I got in my car and I drove about 6 houses past where I was, and the flames came down PCH all the way to the bottom, and then they started coming along towards where I was. And then I looked, I started to back up, and I saw where my house was. Didn't look like much of anything. So I drove past the flames, parked in front of my house, and I thought, well, this is everything I've ever heard in my life, is you go past the front. Once you survive the front, you just put out all the embers. So I got to work. I had actually had this shirt on and some jeans on and some gloves, and I had my ski goggles and a hat, and I just went to work, going around the house with my hoses. My garden lit on fire, so I put that out, flooded the garden, and then just went back and forth between my house and a couple houses, and everywhere I could find embers, I put them out. And then I'd come up to see if there's any firemen. No firemen. But nothing's on fire at this point. And it's probably, the front's gone through maybe an hour before that. So I'm like, well, we got a shot.
What do you mean
here.
the front's gone?
The front, like the flames, like the front of the whole fire went through past my house now. And it's
So
down.
it's not coming up over the hill.
It came over the hill, and now it's going along the side of the hill.
It's
Because you know
going
Stevens
sideways.
there.
It's going north-south. I mean, it's really east-west.
It's head west. It's head west/north.
It's going towards Duke's.
It's going towards Duke's, so
Towards the firemen in the lot.
towards the fireman a lot. And I'm like, okay, it's going to be okay. They're going to come up here once the front goes because we get the canyon break
Yep.
there. So we got shot. They'll just come up and they'll help me as the embers go, and they'll put out anything. Well, palm trees about 10 or 12 past me caught on fire at the porn house. Porn house, palm trees caught on fire, and then they caught the porn house on fire. And then they caught the house one closer to be on fire, Diane Naylor's house. And I've discovered later, sadly, a woman who's an English woman, had been there for 10 years, and her son had been in that unit for 15 years prior. She didn't leave, so she died in the house.
Oh my!
She refused to leave. So she died in the house. I didn't know this at the time, but that was now the fire was coming uphill towards me, and it got 2 or 3 houses. But I thought, well, I got this giant cement house next to me, my friend Lynette's house. I'm like, this is my shot. This is like, it can stop here.
Yeah.
And the other side of me uphill, all the way, I could see a good quarter mile and nothing was on fire. And I thought, well, okay, we got a shot here. And then about 5 or 6 houses down from me, you could see the patio furniture catch on one of the houses. And I looked at the fireman. I'm like, it's just the patio furniture. I can't get it out, but you can with the hose in about 10 seconds. And he's like, sir, you need to leave. So, and that's what those guys do. They would have loved to put that patio furniture out, and probably 25 houses would have been saved if he put that patio furniture out. But once he didn't, and the rest of the house caught, and then the one next to it, and it's uphill from us, and the giant shingle 3-story house is next to me. I'm looking up at that 40 feet above me and thinking,
Where Melanie used to live?
Where Melanie used to live. So when that catches on fire, I'm going to be sitting here with 40-foot flames, 100-foot flames coming at me. I'm like, I don't want that. That was when I realized it was over.
And so that was at 9:30?
About a little after 9 o'clock. And
you had to be the only guy on the beach still.
There were 2 of us, my neighbor 3 doors down, young guy Matt Greenberg. He stuck around with me.
Oh, man.
So Matt stayed.
Oh, he's in Ruth's old house.
And he's in Ruth's old house, which he was, like, the day of the fire, he got his permits to finally do his remodel. And so he and I stayed, and we just kept flooding our houses as best we could. And then when that lit on fire, I had a sheriff come up to me, and, like, he's the sheriff, like the one that you're terrified of.
Yeah.
With, like, the perfectly coiffed little black mustache that you're...
Roscoe P. Coltrane. Like Boss Hog.
2% body fat.
Yeah, yeah.
And he looks at me, and he's got his hand on his thing, and he said, are you refusing to leave? And I said, I think that's my right. And he said, I need to record you, because when you call 911, we're not coming back for you. And I just turned and walked away from him. There was nothing there for me at that point. I walked away, and Matt and I huddled up and saw the flames coming that way and on the other side, and we were in the middle of it, and we knew it was over at that point.
Do you drive towards Santa Monica to get out?
No, we went
north
towards Duke, so we had to go back through the front, and as we drove through, the neighbor died where she was dead. Those 3 houses were on fire, including the port house, and then we got a couple more houses, and Glenn Dexter's house was on fire. And Glenn's been there. His family built the house in 1961. He was a lifeguard and then an urchin diver. Glenn's in his early mid-70s. He's still an urchin diver.
He's the one that went through a propeller?
He's the one with the propeller.
Explain.
But came out fine.
Guy got sucked into a propeller and lived.
Yeah, he was on a hose, and was getting sucked up because one of the propellers was still on slightly in reverse, and the first mate didn't know it. And he's like, I was going up to the propeller, and it was either a head first or feet first. So we chose feet first.
Wow.
How did that chop his legs off?
It kind of chopped one of them off partially. And then they tied it back on, and 10 surgeries later, they finally fused it. And he's like, just fuse it. Put his fin back on, went back to work.
When you're driving through on PCH during that fire, like the front, as you call it, is it like just are you driving actually through flames?
So I'm behind the front. No, but I mean, I've got a video as we left. Matt took video. I didn't, it was too much. But Diane's house the flames were coming out to the middle of the highway. And as we got to Randy's place, Crawdad, on the other side of the road, the red house, turns out he was inside it. He fought the fire until he died inside it. But driving between those 2 houses, the flames were all the way across the road.
So you got to drive through them?
Yes, but that's the yellow part of the flames. The yellow part's not that hot.
Yeah, we all know that.
It's the orange and then the blue stuff.
Blue.
That's the bad part. So it's the yellow part. So yes, I drove through that.
And where do you go? What's the plan here?
My sister-in-law lives about 7 miles away up near in an old ranch house up near Joffrey. So my sister and my mother had already gone there with the dogs. And I'm like, well, I guess that's what's left. So there we went, and there we stayed for the next 2 weeks.
His
And
dogs are amazing. Cleo, Black Lab, and Magic Chihuahua mix, mostly Chihuahua.
Yeah.
And Magic digs in the sand when it's sand crabs. And if you just take a handful of sand crabs and sand and go like this, he eats them all, but they wiggle in his mouth. So
Street dog.
He goes like this,
Super street dog.
like it grosses him out, but he can't stop eating them. So there's just weeks where his stomach's like just pouched out because he had like thousands of sand crabs.
We call that seasoning the fattening.
Yeah.
Seasoning and he's a dog, like both dogs, like they just go up and down the beach. There's no public access to this beach from Duke's all the way down to Moon Shadows. Well,
Right.
There's a place way down there, but for whatever reason, there's no public access. And the guy that lived there, where they're like, no, this is where the easement goes.
Yeah.
The stairs from PCH for everybody is supposed to go right past your house. My understanding is he's like, yeah, cool. You can keep finding me and I'll just keep going to court.
Well, he did, and he did lose, and they put the biggest fine the Coastal Commission's ever done to anybody, $4.2 million.
Wow.
And he said,
And I think he cried for a while. And then he continued to fight it all the way through. But right now, that fine still exists for that guy.
but
Wow.
he never put the easement.
But he gave them access to it. He had to remove his stairs. You know, he had egress. He required two. One of them was over the easement, and it was permitted in there. But he had to remove it anyway, so he had no second exit. That house also burned, by the way.
Yeah.
That house is gone.
I just came down PCH today for the first time because I live up in like Oxnard. and
Yeah.
It routed me down. I was like, oh, it's open, I guess. And it routed me down that way. It was surreal to drive.
It's,
there
I would
this
say,
morning.
between Topanga and Carbon Beach, on the beach, I would say 92 to 95% of the homes are gone.
Yeah.
So you go up to like Joffrey's north
Yeah.
Malibu.
Yeah.
Do you just put on the TV?
No, there's no power. There's no nothing. I just got there and went to bed. There's nothing to do anymore.
And you wake up and
And I wake up and we're like, do you think our house is there? I'm like, I don't think our house is there. And it took us about half a day to get confirmation our house was gone. Because we did have, Derry Naylor down the end of the beach. He and his son and his next door neighbor's son-in-law, the three of them stayed. And those three people saved their house and about 5 or 6 other houses, a 6-unit condo complex, a 16-unit apartment complex where Chris and Laura live. And
yeah, that's all. I saw that on the.
so that still exists. All those exist because of Derry, his son, and Leo, the neighbor's son-in-law.
When you're
Those
fighting,
3 people.
wow. When you're fighting the fire, in the back of my mind, it'd be like there's going to be a point where I'm unable to escape without being eaten by fire.
Yeah.
And so, what's your exit plan there? Just take a paddleboard and hightail it
No
to Catalina?
paddleboard because it's too windy. So just go wade out in the water. And then when I realized that all the homes were burning, I thought that may not be a good exit plan.
Yeah. No back
because
in plan.
There may no way to get back up on the beach, and eventually high tide comes every 6 hours. And I would have been okay. I would have figured out a way to swim down to Duke's, climb the rocks, climb the fence, get in the parking lot there, because I know, well, that's where the firemen were hanging out. So I figured I was pretty safe there. I figured I could have done that if it had gone really bad.
So we hear about like there's no water in the hydrants, which was true. The reservoir
Not where I was.
in the Palisades had been drained, and it was one of them was inoperable because it was like construction or something. But I haven't heard since you told me this on the phone. The firemen were told not to put out fire.
Yeah.
I thought maybe they were all already committed to the Palisades, and that's why there's no firemen. They couldn't get back and save any. You're telling me there's 40 trucks.
There were 5 times, 6 times the number of firemen that were there in 1993. And in 93, they saved all but 1 or 2 houses on the beach.
So they knew what it took, what they needed gear-wise, truck-wise. They knew what tools they needed. Mm-hmm. They were complete. So had those firemen, it's a hypothetical, who knows? But if those firemen were able to put out the fire,
Yes.
is Malibu still there?
Yeah. I mean, they were, yes. What we hear from the fire chief. And I
You
went
said that
to a
pretty
meeting.
with certainty.
Yeah, the fire. If they fought the fire, they would have saved most of the houses. The vast majority they would have saved.
Well, they couldn't do it in the Palisades. They couldn't save them all.
That seems like that
Or any of them.
My guess is there was probably a lot more wind up there too.
And a lot more trees for things.
Trees.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unfathomable. None of it's fathomable in any way. But I drove through the Palisades 3 or 4 days ago, and you can't believe in like a suburban setting that everything is gone
It looks like Kansas.
because there's nothing left. And like you can't even fathom that. It goes down to Sunset Boulevard and burns things on Sunset Boulevard. It's beyond the imagination.
So there has to be. Look, you ran for city council. You've always been involved. I'm not asking you to say any political statements, but how your deduction, your logic of reasoning and deduction, your powers of reason. How do you tell? What am I trying to say? Where does that come from? Don't put out fires.
And maybe what's the reasoning behind it? This is just the beginning of these fires. This could spread even more places. We can't fight a fire for 2 straight weeks.
They'll talk about it as being a once in a generation wind event. That's what they're saying.
Was it?
Not to me.
I remember.
What I said. I've been on. I've been there since 1967. I have knowledge existence from 1970, and I've been through thousands of easterly wind events. Many of them like that, hundreds, I would say, at least many dozens that were like that. And the same sort of thing, 30, 40 miles an hour winds at the beach. Happens all the time. But as I said at the beginning, now every time there's wind, there seems to be fire.
Yeah.
And what is that? Is that power lines going down? What is that? Is that maniacs who like to make fire? I don't know. I mean, we know after this one, homeless people, but it's a big deal.
Camped around a fire.
Having been in Malibu, in the last 5 years we've had, or 7 years we've had dozens of fires.
Yeah, the Woolsey fires was so huge when they had to release the horses. It was, you get when you have a fire and you have a ranch, you just let the horses go, and they just somehow they just know how to get out of a fire.
They hope.
Yeah, the One Gun Ranches had to do that. They did that with stuff. And they have a big enough corral that they could just release the cows and stuff into the corral with the corral open, and they can stay in the middle of the corral, and they survive around the edges. The animals figure it out.
So but I don't know. Where does that order? I'm speechless.
I don't even know what to say about it, too. But they didn't fight the fire.
Is it mayoral? Is it like everyone's like Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass?
Way up the chain somewhere. Way up. It's fire chief. It's way up the chain. Those firemen are firemen. They fight fires. That's what they do.
That's what they do.
They do what they're told to do, how they do it, and then they're freaking good at it. And they're amazing at it. Just as when I watched them do a bit of it in '93 and said, that's for the pros. Time to move on. Those guys are professionals. They know what they're doing with it. So I don't want to second guess in the process. It was a bummer to me. It was different to me. '93 to 2007, it was a different policy.
Do you think that had anything to do with the water not coming out of the hydrants in the Palisades?
Clearly there was an issue there. I've hiked up by Skull Rock in that area hundreds of times. I've seen that reservoir empty for years. Doesn't make any sense to me that they would do that. I don't know what the story is behind that. Why?
There's a lot of talk of these don't usually happen in January. They usually happen this. We thought we were done with it for the year.
Yeah, but it's been empty for years, not months.
Yeah.
Years and years and
those
years.
easterly winds. I remember paddleboarding it's the Santa Ana winds, right?
Yeah.
I remember paddleboarding, and I had like a bit of a panic attack because I was having a hard time getting back to the beach.
Don't paddleboard in Santa Ana winds.
It just kept blowing me. I was going and I had to thank God I was wrestling. I was way into high school. I was coaching, and I just got down and like I was shooting a double leg, and I was and they're just laying down and paddling, just making myself less of a sail. So my 3.5 years on the beach, I also know that happens all the time.
Yeah, you don't do that. Yeah, that happens a lot. The winds happen a lot.
Did you plead with them? Please come put out my house?
Please. My house wasn't on fire. I'd be like, the patio furniture, if you can get that out, we got a real good shot here.
What do they say to you? They just go,
he's like, sir, you got to go. Sir, you got to go.
But they don't say
Please
we were
leave.
told not to.
No, they're not. They can't say that. That's
Why
not? How
not?
it works.
Well, then why were they there? Why were they assembled?
They did have.
Why am I shouting?
If you remember the story from the Woolsey fire, there was in Malibu West, all the fire engines stayed outside of the areas that were burning. And Malibu West was burning, and one engine, who was a local guy, couldn't take it anymore. And he just drove down there with the locals who had hoses, and he went down and saved 20 or 30 houses. He just couldn't take the orders anymore.
Oh, so they had the same orders for the Woolsey fire?
Clearly.
But you would think the Woolsey fire, that's a lot of money. You'd think those people would have a voice, and they could kick that voice and that money up the food chain to have a different policy from the Woolsey fire 3 years ago to now.
You got to remember what we talked about at the beginning as well. This is also old school Malibu. These are not $10 million homes, most of these that burned. Most of the Woolsey firehouses were older homes, and almost every single home that burned in Malibu this time is an older home. They're not $10 million homes. When you get to La Costa Beach, there are a few of those, but everything from my area and then all the way out to Topanga, that's the old stuff that was built from 1920 to 1950 or 60. And
So if you were a conspiracy theorist,
get rid of those. So,
Oh wow.
it's really 1920s to maybe 60s. My house was built in 1923.
yeah.
And so all these places, and these are, all this, it's kind of, it's weird to say, but it's kind of the working man section of town. My father
for
was,
sure.
and
Yeah.
my father was a newspaper editor, and then he was a house painter. My mother was a secretary. And so, there's rentals you can still get now for $2,000-$3,000 a month, and you can live on the beach. You could. That is now over.
No, I'm glad that
It's over.
It's over.
That's over.
It's going to be, what would be your year estimate? How many years before there's actual homes on the beach?
Rebuilds of that stuff?
Yeah. Well, let me paint a picture. I'm in, I live in Playa Vista.
Mm-hmm.
Me and my sons go in the car. Let's just go for a drive up the coast. And I'm there, and it's just house, the way it was.
Oh, it'll never be the way it was. Not even close.
How so?
A lot of those houses really past Moon Shadows to Topanga. The vast majority were up on piles.
Oh, yeah.
They're up high. They've burned off. They're out over the mean high tide line, which is a Coastal Commission rule. You can't do that anymore. So
Meaning the tide comes in under the house.
under the house. And so the rules are you have to be on cement caissons. So the base number that every contractor has told me in the last bit, if to put something up on caissons, it's about $3 million to do the caissons and the foundation. A lot of these places were, like there was an old motel that had 20 or 30 places. And then all these places, like the big ones are 800 square feet. How do you put $3 million underground and then put your 1,000 square foot, 800 square foot house back on top of it, because that's all you're allowed to build, which costs you another $1 million or $2 million. Your dirt's with $2 million. Suddenly you've got a house, you're in $6 or $7 million, but your house is worth about 2 to 3. It's pretty quick math.
So
nobody's rebuilding that. If the rules are such, if you're not able to build the way they were before, which the state and Gavin Newsom are now saying we'll be able to, I don't believe it. It just, having dealt with the Coastal Commission for the last 25 years, I've given testimony to them many times.
It's the same as like when the hurricanes hit the East Coast and they hit the Outer Banks, and those houses that are up on stilts go out. They don't go back up on those. That's the end of a day.
That's the character. That's the character of Malibu. You've got that. You've got the people in the hills, the far west end that have open space and ranches, and they're, our end where you were, we're ocean people. You get farther out to the west, they're horses and they're beekeepers. And there's a lot of just kind of anything and everything. But our end, everybody just does the water. We were all, my mother talked about when she moved in the 60s, it was all McDonnell Douglas and all those guys who worked, and they would come out on the weekends and they'd go to their place and they'd go lobster diving, and they'd have bonfires, and they would cook the lobster, and there were still clams back in the 60s. You could get them at Topanga and you could get them at Surfrider. There were still clams that were edible. You do all this stuff and you literally do a whole feast on the ocean. And that was how folks, they worked all week at their jobs, some of them mundane jobs, and they'd come out and they'd get in the water. And we knew in the fall you'd get lobster, and we knew in the spring and the summer you'd get the bass that we fished for all the time. There's food in the water.
And when are the gray whales? They go up to Alaska to eat. They go down to Mexico to have sex.
Yes. So
That's a long migratory pattern.
Head south in October for sex and loving, and then they head back up. The unrequited males head back up in February, and then the males who had a good time stayed till March-ish, and then the females and the calves come up in May and June.
I've had gray whales the size of school buses go under my paddleboard. And my son was in a kayak, and he goes, Dad, because it's just coming right at us. It's like a jet engine. It's huge. And I go, this is too cool. My exact words were, this is too cool. You're not allowed to be afraid.
Yeah.
And that gray whale went under, it had maybe a 5-10, it seems real close. Maybe got under about 5 feet under his kayak and went under me, and he never came. It was like lash.
You can feel them.
Yeah.
Even if you can't see them, you can feel
silent.
them.
It was like the last, all right, this is my last show of the afternoon, guys.
Yeah.
And he went in and he just kept trucking. And I've gone at them. Remember me, you, and Chris? I think you and I were fishing. Chris Rogers came out to join us, and there was a fourth person. I don't remember who it was. But there was a gray whale on its back right outside of Duke's.
Yep.
and we thought it was beaching itself,
Yeah. Well, he was scratching his belly.
scratching his belly and his back
He was scratching barnacles off.
because there's all those rocks behind Duke's, and we got right up on that fucking whale. And I don't know, in my mind, Joe, my alcoholic brain, oh, I'm going to help save this whale. I'm going to be on CBS News. Like, this is it. Colleen and fucking Chuck.
Can't wait to tell the RZA tomorrow.
Yeah. And I'm going to be this hero. Like, hey, look, I've always been a guy that's about the animals, you know? And he was just scratching his back. And I think we kind of bugged him. And he just turns, and through that blowhole, he just sprayed shitty toilet whale water all over
Smell of
Chris.
the ocean.
It just the ocean and bad vagina.
It's intense.
And he blew it all over Chris.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Chris was terrified. Chris was scared the entire. He was like Shaggy and Scooby Doo the whole way.
Remember, the whale seemed to follow him when he went away too, went right up underneath him.
Yeah.
Like 6 inches underneath him, but he didn't know it was coming because we thought it was going the other way. That was a good sound he made.
He had dolphins. Remember that day? The dolphins just followed him all the way home.
Yeah. So we get down the regular, go out for a paddle, and you go along, and then you find the dolphins, and they find you, or they find you. And I just had this on January 6th. I went for a paddle, and 2 dolphins decided to follow me, and they would come up right underneath and turn, like 6 inches, a foot under the board, and turn up, look at you with their eye, and they're just better at it than you are, so they're just doing wherever they want to go. They're better at it. They're better in the ocean. So they cruise along, and occasionally they'd come back and check on me. Did a few mile paddle. It was spectacular, and it's there, and that's. The other thing that I was thinking about and that kind of freaked me out is because I've been on the beach once since then. And we had in the last few years the migratory birds that have decided to show up, godwits and all the rest of them, and the plovers and everything. And I think about it now, and I think about what happens with that. What happens with if it's just completely open? We have tide pools there that are probably the greatest ones left at least between Palos Verdes and Point Doom. They are like the birth of everything. Everything, it's like an estuary. Tide pools do the same thing. The intertidal zone, all the fish come out of that. And, we had one day somebody came down, didn't understand. And I walked down the beach. By the time I came back, he had pulled 30 starfish off the rocks.
Can't do that.
And I explained to him, I said, so when you did that, you've killed most of those because you've ripped their legs off when you did that. And I looked in the area he pulled off. I watched for the next 2 days. There's nothing there. Like, he pulled all of them off. I'm like, we put them back, and some of them probably survived.
Was he an Airbnb guy?
Yeah. And there's a lack
city
of understanding.
dork.
And it's like, you can have such a massive impact on nature in such a short period of time. The other one I think of is when I was a kid, and there was a guy who came down in a bucket full like this. I was maybe 8 or 9. And I looked inside his bucket, and he had all the little abalone. Now, abalone had to be 5 1/4 inches. But this guy had a bucket full of all the little ones, and you're allowed 5 of them, and he must have had 100. But I'm 8. So there's only so much confrontation in me at that point. There was a little bit, but there's only so much. I'm like, what are you doing? And he didn't care, and off he went. And the way abalone breed, they need a density of population. So one guy in one afternoon of low tide ended abalone in our area for about 10 years.
Wow.
So I think about the population of the creatures with that
Well, maybe
and the onslaught.
Maybe there's a rejuvenative. Maybe there's more because there's not people messing with them.
Correct. They came back because nobody, we would do our version of the abalone, and we all licenses, and we'd get together on the beach because there were about 6 or 8 of us who would die for the abalone back when I was a teenager. And we would say, like, how many, like, I'm going to take on January 16th at low tide, I'm going to take 4. And then I might say, and then everybody else like, again, taking this many. So we'd know that, okay, we're going to take on those 2 days, we're going to probably take about 20 to 25 abalone. And then we'd gather in the evenings, like, how many did you see? So we're concerned about the population and stuff. And as long as you're taking like 1/20th of the population in the process, they come back.
Joe, you remember when you were 8 years old diving for abalone, right? What were you doing at 8 years old?
Diving in a pool. That's what I was doing.
Oh, sunburnt to shit.
Yeah.
No, but do you think, so what, 10 years from now, what does that strip of PCH look like? It's like a big, giant sponsored hospital. Is it a Tesla factory?
No, it'll be some version of, hopefully some of us get to rebuild. I'm going to try like hell to rebuild.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you. What kind of information do you have now from the powers that be about what's next? How does insurance work for everybody around the country wondering, like?
So we have the governor's edict Coastal Commission, back the fuck up. Let these people build how they did. We have the Coastal Commission more or less just sitting back and waiting for all this to die down so that they can put in their edicts as they would like to do. That's my expectation. I hope to God it's not true, and I hope they actually do. I tried at our last meeting, I tried to corner the Southern California guy to say, what are the rules really going to be? Are we really going to have to put $3 million underground to do this? Because then none of us can rebuild. And of course, he didn't particularly answer that. So I don't know. It's going to be very expensive to rebuild. I have USAA insurance, which as far as I can tell is the best experience you can possibly have. They've been generally terrific with us, but I'm the absolute minority. And everybody else I've talked to, about half of them have fair plan. And those folks, unless they come up with other monies from elsewhere, will never be able to rebuild.
And driving by, there's a lot of cleanup to do. Who's tasked with that?
So there's phase 1 and phase 2 coming. Phase 1 is the EPA coming in to get Tesla batteries and all the household cleaning items and other things like the most toxic stuff. And then you move to phase 2, which is you have a choice of either getting the Army Corps of Engineers to come out and scrape your property clean. They will do it for free, except if your insurance has any money for that, they'll take it. Or you can do it privately. And privately is probably going to be, it's a viable thing. A lot of us, including I, will probably look to do it privately. But there's more steps because I got to go once I do the private cleanup. There's any variety of things that I have to do afterwards, including getting EPA to certify it after we're clear. So there's a lot more steps, but I might be able to save $80,000, $60,000 that I can then put into rebuilding the house. Because it's going to be
You know, they should get to do it. The same guys that they got to help fight the fires, the incarcerated, would love a day out or a week. I'm being dead serious.
I know you are.
Those fire camp guys, you know that's my passion is speaking in prisons. Those guys, they just took all the guys out of California men's camp. There's all these incarcerated men that train to be firemen, and they that'd be a great thing to do.
I have love for those guys because they saved my house in 1983.
83?
1983, we had storms from the ocean. We had 5 houses on our beach fall into the water, which is how I always expected we'd lose the house if we ever did.
Yeah.
So 1983, we lost our we had where Jillian's house is and Lynette's house. There was an empty lot there at that time, and the wall broke, and so waves came behind it and took part of ours out and undermined the corner of our house. That afternoon, we had probably 20 convicts come down in the cruise you're talking about. And they came down I was 16 years old, along with me and my buddy Sam. We built the biggest damn sandbag wall you could ever imagine. It was 10 feet high, 40 feet long, and about 8 feet wide. And we just sat there and watched the next day with the high tide came up and that sandbag wall held. And my house, which we had literally put on a hydraulic jack, the corner of it, like taking the house up, survived.
What pride, like to build something that saves your home, where you've had every Christmas, every Easter egg hunt, every birthday. Is there something you wish you grabbed? Is there something that really keeps you up at night?
I did grab the pelican. You know, the hanging pelican.
Yes.
I got that, and I got schlock.
What's that?
That's the key art from John Landis's first film. That was, my dad painted a house, one of his first houses he painted, and the guy didn't have enough money to take him, so he did a trade for the key art from John Landis's first film that he shot in Agoura Hills called Schlock. And that original oil painting, I got that. So that was like a big deal for me.
What about Mom's Green Bay Packer ownership?
It burned in the fire.
Wow. Oh man, all Callie's.
Or one share of that, all of Callie's artwork she did as a kid, all gone.
Those pictures of Callie when you walk in, from first grade on.
I saved most of those.
Yeah.
But that.
What did you not get? Is there anything
that green salad bowl, the monster salad bowl that was hand done? That would have been spectacular to have. All the photos, every photo taken before digital photos existed, were in that house of our house in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s, all gone.
You know what I think of all the
80s.
time? Is Mom's little pedal thing.
Gone.
You see those commercials, you're like, who would ever use that stupid thing? She'd just sit there, watch TV.
We're going to get her a bigger one.
Yeah,
we're gonna spend the $500 and get her.
USAA is gonna cover it.
USAA is gonna help us replace that little tiny nothingness.
What could prevent this from happening again?
Oh my God, I can't even fathom what would do that because it's such an aberration. Well, one of the things
people not putting out a fire isn't really an aberration. That's not an aberration. That's an edict.
Every home that's rebuilt will be built not just fire resistant, it'll be fireproof. Means
Oh,
no
Jillian's.
eaves.
I'm interrupting you on purpose. Jillian next door. Jillian Michaels, the trainer, used to live right next door to us.
Yeah.
And she has this. It's like a mausoleum, cement, and she just put some fucking trainer juice on it. It's completely on the outside, perfect.
Yeah.
However,
Yeah, so Lynette and Paul live there now, and they've been there a few years. Wonderful, spectacular neighbors, and they just kind of found a place, and like that's been her home. But that place, when Jillian did remodels, she took out the glass blocks and she put in glass. It was beautiful. All that glass shattered in the fire, and so the fire went into the house. So the frame
fire
of the
comes in
house,
through the window and eliminates the inside here. The outside looks like, oh, that house made it.
Yeah.
Oh no.
yeah, you've seen it. It's a
Yeah.
square.
No, I
cement
think
the only
I-
one
I
that's
think
standing.
I think I can picture it.
Oh,
'cause
yeah,
there was,
you
there was
can.
one that was standing alone as I drove down.
I'm
this
next door to that, and 20 houses this way and 20 houses the other way are all burned. So that house is there, but like, what I can only imagine that what the pain they're going to go through. Their place is trashed on the inside. Now all of their neighbors, like the reason you're there, as JJ will tell you, is because of all the people and all the community. One of the things I tell this story every now and again. I think it was my daughter's like 8th birthday, and we had all the neighbors come for a birthday party. And we had kids that were 8. We had teenagers, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60s, and literally people in their 70s and 80s there. We had every decade of humanity there at that house. It was like German style. The Germans do that,
Yeah.
and a few other cultures do that, but we had it. That's our community. We had Maurice, the now 93-year-old Englishman on the deck, swims every day. He's 93 years old. He now lives in Eagle Rock. He's not swimming every day anymore.
Oh.
I got my mother's 90th birthday. Every day we could go out and she could at least see the ocean. She could see that. We don't have that anymore.
Maurice is an old buzzard British. He would swim. He had a stroke while swimming, and the firemen are like, "Are you all right? Are you all right?" And he told them to fuck off. He had a fucking stroke, and he's like, "Fuck off!" Half of his face, "Fuck off."
He's a spectacular. And his landlord Dave, who was a heavy equipment mechanic. These are just regular folks. He's been there.
Yeah,
since
this isn't like Tommy
1969.
Mottola, Mariah Carey houses.
Right.
This, yeah.
Yeah, Dave's house was covered in asbestos tiles, just exactly the way he wanted it.
Yeah.
Don't touch his house. Just perfectly exactly the way he wanted it. Pristine. And, we had a lot of that, and we had a lot of neighbors like that, and the Nailers who've been there since the 1970, and the Verunos. There's a lot of old school folks who've been around a long time, and kind of a special place. Now, where Chris Rogers lived, there were 16 apartment buildings. They go for $2,500 to $3,500. Just a lot of 30-year-olds can afford to live that. The meta folks, wherever else, they can afford that. So we had a community of stuff.
Yeah.
And we'd gather on the beach, and we'd see each other sometimes in the water.
How do people help now? What affects you personally? Like, what directly affects you when they help?
Oh my gosh, we've had a lot of help from everybody. I got a lot of love coming.
Like, if the listeners want to help.
For me, I would say it's lobbying the state and whatever else to make sure that we can rebuild our homes. Allowing that would be like that's the greatest thing is allowing the folks to try to recreate whatever way we did this community, this environment that we had that was so extraordinary. Just as everybody, Altadena, they want to recreate their community. Palisades is going to want to create their community. We want the same thing. We want to have that opportunity to build that back and to create that.
We got to wrap up. We're losing the room. This is nice, buddy. Look at these man. Show Joe your man hands.
Man
They're
paws.
a little
gnarled
They're a little
paws.
worn out.
I love you, buddy, so much.
I love you too, Poppy.
My family loves you. I know you love them. Carl Randall.
Love you guys.
Hot Tub Carl. All right, folks, put your name on it.
Jay Moore's my uncle.